Hello and welcome to our latest To The Max episode, where I am delighted to be joined by Dr Tim Aker, former MEP, small business champion, academic and now author. Tim represented East of England in the European Parliament, later became spokesperson for the Federation of Small Business, helping bridge the gap between small business and government. And most recently, he's edited a fascinating book, The First Brexiteer, the Diaries of Marten, 1970 to 1979. We'll be talking about his book, his reflections on Brexit, and now the challenges facing small business today, and what's next for him as he launches his new communication venture. Tim, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So, first of all, I want to talk about your book. So, what inspired you to edit and publish Sir Neil Marten's first Diaries of the First Brexiteer?
Well, after I left politics in 2019, I was in a bit of a limbo and didn't really know what to do with myself. And a colleague of mine, a good friend of mine, was finishing his PhD at the University of Buckingham. And talking with him, I thought, this is really exciting, this is really interesting. So I did a master's at the University of Buckingham with the wonderful guidance of Professor Simon Heffer, soon to be in the House of Lords, I'm pleased to say. And it was on the period of the early 70s when Britain was going into Europe. And this name kept coming up that I'd really not had that much experience of, Neil Marten. And all of the books, all the authoritative books, all the biographies, he was having a bit part role in it. And I thought, this is a character worth exploring. And so did some research, and his papers are in the Bodleian Library in Oxford. And when he died in 1985, the family deposited the papers there. So I used that for a considerable piece of my master's research. Fast forward a few years, and I want to turn the master's dissertation into a paper for a journal. And with that, you need the copyright permission of the family. So I went down to Hampshire, I tracked them down, went down to Hampshire to meet them and tell them all about my project and get their permission for the papers already at Oxford. And then Sir Neil's son Anthony, after lunch, said, oh, you might be interested in these. Comes out with a stack of the diaries, really? Which for a historian is like striking gold.
Yes.
It is absolute, it's a revelation. Mm. So I said to him there and then, can I please edit these? And they thought, well, nobody would really be interested in them. I said, you're out of your mind. The man played a pivotal role in trying to stop Britain going in. Yeah. He was the chairman of the No campaign in the first referendum in 1975. And he was the only one that Margaret Thatcher really confided in about her real views on Europe, which at the time we all recognised Margaret Thatcher wearing that terrible jumper with all the Europe flags and being a flag-waving pro-European, when deep down in the diaries she confided in Neil that she really wasn't happy with a Europe of ever closer union. So it's fascinating, yeah. And it's, wonderful to bring something that was just collecting dust to a wider audience and to give acknowledgement to a politician who played an important role in post-war politics that has not really been given that much notice before.
And how amazing, the fact that you went down there, had lunch and this came out. So well done for that. I mean, that's absolutely brilliant. And that really does put some meat on the bones as to where we are now, doesn't it?
Well, it explains the whole period of going in. Britain voted several stages to go in. Mm. Edward Heath played a masterstroke in not having one set piece vote. Mm. He really wanted to go in and was going to get us in come what may. And he played a wonderful game. Mm. So in October 1971, there was a vote on the principle of joining. It wasn't legislative, it was just a principle of joining. And the government won with 112. And observers say that that is the overwhelming vote for entry. Fast forward to February 1972, when the enabling legislation comes in, the government only squeak by with a majority of 8.
Really?
Edward Heath has to call it a vote of confidence. 15 Conservative MPs vote against that vote of confidence, which had not happened before. They were fully prepared to bring the government down on him.
Gosh.
You have famous pro-marketeers like Roy Jenkins, who vote against going in the enabling legislation, the second reading in 17 February 1972. When the votes read out, Labour MPs who were then against going into Europe, how the times have changed in the space of 50 years. These Labour MPs who were dead against going in were furious that the Liberal Party had saved Edward Heath's bacon, and they physically try and drag the Liberal leader over to the government benches to show what they already knew, that he was a closet Tory. Absolute bedlam. In the Diaries, he recounts that MPs have been whipped to vote against what they really believe in. Labour pro-marketeers are going through the no lobby. Some of them are covering their faces and crying. It is an absolute scene, but it just shows how Britain was dragged into going into Europe in the early 70s. And it conflicts with Edward Heath's desire for Britain to go in with the full-hearted consent of Parliament and people. He said that in Paris in 1970 before the election, but of course Neil Marten kept reminding him of where was this full-hearted consent when from the vote of principle goes from 112 to 8.
Yeah.
And of course Neil Marten introduces the referendum amendment, which splits the Labour Party. It forces Roy Jenkins to resign as deputy leader of Labour. But how important is that?
Yeah.
That all the talk of Europe in the last 15, 20 years has been about the referendum, and we must have a referendum, the people must have the say. And it was Neil Marten that introduced the referendum amendment in 1972 that called for a consultative referendum, which we had in 2016.
We did indeed, and I think we all remember it very well.
Very, very well, very well.
So from this, what lessons from the those early Eurosceptic battles of the 70s still feel relevant in today's debate about Britain and Europe?
Britain had never been at the table when the rules were decided, and that was a consequential factor. The 6 that formed the European Economic Community put in place a treaty that called for ever closer union. And Britain at the time, with its links to the Commonwealth, with the United States of America, and of course Europe, was stuck in the centre of a Venn diagram, and Anthony Eden called it the 3 pillars of influence. Britain never really felt part of this European project. Joining it when we did, we were catching a train a few stops down the line without deciding where the destination was. Second, the people were told it was the common market. It was colloquially called the common market. So to the average punter, it was just about trade. And back then, Britain had a productivity crisis. The economy was on very weak foundations. So the idea of a new tariff-free export market was gold dust, and that's why many relatively free market conservatives and business organisations supported entry on the basis that it was just a common market. They weren't talking back then about a European flag and a European army, although Edward Heath, conveniently after we joined, did want to take Britain into a single European currency in 1980.
Really?
It had been discussed for decades before Tony Blair and John Major were talking about it at the end of the 1990s. So we weren't there as a founding member. We joined too late. It was only broadcast as a matter of trade and business, so that when you fast forward to the early 90s and they talk about changing its name to a European Union with a currency, with a foreign policy, and later on with a president, it becomes something completely different from what people thought they were buying into in 1975 when the referendum happened. But the people like Neil Marten were talking about the political consequences, ever closer union meaning union, from the start.
Yes, yeah. And how things could have been so different, thinking back on those votes in the first place, and you know, to where, as you say, 2016, and where we are now with it all. So, was there anything in the diary that surprised you or changed your view of that period?
UKIP could have been formed in 1972.
Really?
The Conservative Party came this close to splitting in half.
That's interesting.
Well, I wouldn't say half. The Eurosceptics, so the anti-marketeers as they were known,
Yes.
were being bullied by their constituency associations. They were being threatened with deselection. I mean, this is something that, you know, the Conservative grassroots back then were meant to be deferential and loyal. Absolutely none of it. If the MP was anti-market, the association was dead against them. And you have pitched battles between Conservative MPs and their associations, which come to loggerheads to the point where Neil Marten and a group of 6 other Conservative anti-marketeers say to their associations, right, if you continue this, I'm going to call a by-election. Like what Dr Scarswell did. I'm going to call a by-election and I'll fight you on my own terms. And that backed off. The Conservative associations just ceased operations because the Tory party then was losing seats to Labour hand over fist. One particular, the Bromsgrove by-election, which when you could call Conservative seats safe, was a safe Conservative seat. They'd lost that. And so the Conservative Party was on very sticky wicket threatening these MPs who were patriots to principle. They really didn't care. They just wanted to put the country first. On the 29th of February, and this is quite prophetic because it's leap year day, isn't it? Sir Robin Turton, who was first elected in 1929, so when the father of the house, the longest serving MP, he was an anti-marketeer and he'd had enough. And he goes to the Times newspaper and announces, I will call a by-election because I'm sick of all of this pro-market nonsense and being harassed and harangued by associations. I'm going to call a by-election on the provision that Labour stand aside. Now imagine for a moment if Labour had said, okay, we'll stand aside. You would have had the Tory party split, fighting one another. And with how acrimonious that could have been, how that would have dominoed down in the other constituencies. So it was a fascinating time when you just realise how the Conservative Party was split on Europe, as Labour were, because Labour's divisions have been emphasised quite rightly. You know, Roy Jenkins resigning as deputy leader, Dick Taverne, the MP for Lincoln, he again paradoxically was pro-market and his association was anti. And so he called a by-election, stood as an independent and won. And would it surprise you to believe that his Labour opponent later became Tony Blair's Foreign Secretary? It was Margaret Beckett, known as Margaret Jackson then, yes. And she was pro-European when she was there under Tony Blair, but she was anti when she stood in the Lincoln by-election. How amazing. Times change.
Absolutely, that's really interesting. Well, I've got to ask you, I mean, you've written this book. This book sounds absolutely fascinating. Where can we get the book?
You can get it on Amazon, you can get it on Politico's, Barnes & Noble. It's distributed across bookstores, but obviously everyone goes first and foremost to Amazon, so you can get it for a nice sum, $14.99.
That's not a bad price.
Not bad at all.
To give you all of the history of actually where we are now almost, isn't it? So thank you. Thank you for telling us all about your book. And please, viewers, do go out and buy the book if you are interested in our history and exactly where we've got to from the humble beginnings to where we are now. Then please go out and buy Tim's book. Thank you for watching us today, and thank you, Tim, for joining us.
Thank you.